A story of secrets, suffering, and the truth that could not stay buried. The hospital room was cold, not in the way hospitals usually are, not just the sterile, air-conditioned kind of cold that clings to white walls and tiled floors. No, this cold was different. It was the kind of cold that settles into a room when something has gone terribly, terribly wrong. The kind of cold that has nothing to do with temperature. Cynthia lay on the narrow bed, her body still trembling. Her gown was damp with sweat. Her eyes stared at the ceiling, vacant, hollow, as if the woman who used to live behind them had quietly packed her things and left. Beside her, on the metal tray that the nurses had pushed to the corner of the room, sat the evidence of 9 months of hope, a tuber of yam, perfectly formed, brown-skinned, real. The nurses had not known what to do with it. They had never seen anything like it. One of them had whispered something under her breath and stepped out of the room. The doctor had written something in his notes, closed the folder, and not returned. Nobody wanted to touch it. Nobody wanted to explain it. And Peter, her husband of 12 years, stood at the foot of her bed with his fists clenched at his sides, his jaw set like stone, his eyes burning with something that was not grief, not confusion, not even shock. It was disgust. "What is this?" His voice came out low, dangerous, the kind of quiet that is louder than any scream. "What have you done, Cynthia?" She turned to look at him. Her lips parted, but no sound came out. 12 years. He took a step toward her. 12 years I have waited. 12 years I have prayed. I have fasted. I have gone to hospitals with you, paid doctors, held your hand through every disappointment. And now this? He pointed at the tray, his hand shaking. "This is what you were carrying? This is what you gave me?" "Peter, don't." He stepped back. His eyes were wet now, but not with love. "Don't say my name. Don't say anything. I don't even know who you are anymore." He walked out of the room. The door swung shut behind him. And Cynthia, alone with the cold and the silence and the thing that should not have been, closed her eyes. She did not cry. She had no tears left. To understand how a marriage arrives at such a moment, you have to go back. You have to go back to the very beginning, to the first time Peter brought Cynthia home, to the smile on Teresa's face when she opened the front door, and to what that smile was really hiding. Peter was 31 years old when he met Cynthia Adaze at a mutual friend's birthday gathering. She was laughing when he first saw her, head thrown back, completely unself-conscious, the kind of laughter that fills an entire room and makes strangers smile without knowing why. He watched her for a long time before he found the courage to cross the room and introduce himself. By the end of the night, he had her number. By the end of the month, he was in love. Cynthia was the kind of woman who made a home feel warmer just by entering it. She cooked without being asked. She remembered small details, the way you took your tea, the name of your grandmother, the song that made you sad. She was not loud or demanding. She was steady and deep, like a river that runs clear all the way to the bottom. Peter knew without a single doubt that she was the one. He told his mother. Teresa was 68 years old at the time, a tall, lean woman with sharp eyes that had seen more than she ever discussed. She had raised Peter alone after his father passed when the boy was just 7. She had worked, sacrificed, gone without, so that her only son could have everything. Peter was not just her child. He was her reason, her legacy, the single living proof that her life had amounted to something. When Peter told her about Cynthia, Teresa smiled. It was a warm smile, practiced, generous, but something shifted in her eyes, something quick and dark, like a shadow crossing water, and then it was gone, and the smile remained, and she said, "Bring her to meet me. I would love to know the woman who has captured my son's heart." So Peter brought Cynthia home, and the moment Cynthia stepped through that door, bright-eyed, carrying a small bag of fruit as a gift, her voice soft and respectful as she greeted the older woman. Teresa looked at her with eyes that smiled and a heart that had already made its decision. She did not like this woman. She could not have explained it, not in any way that made rational sense. Cynthia had done nothing wrong, said nothing wrong. She was polite and warm and clearly devoted to Peter. But there are hatreds that have no logical root, that grow in the dark places of the heart without seed or reason. And what Teresa felt in that moment was exactly that kind of hatred. This woman was going to take her son, not in the ordinary way that a wife takes a husband, that Teresa could have accepted. What Teresa feared, though she never said it aloud, was that Cynthia would become Peter's world, that his face would turn toward her the way a plant turns toward light, that Teresa herself, the woman who had given everything, sacrificed everything, would become secondary. A background figure, a mother he visited on weekends. She was not going to allow that. The wedding was planned for a Saturday in November. On the Friday evening before, when the house was filled with relatives and laughter and the smell of food being prepared, Teresa found a quiet moment with Cynthia. She came to her room. She knocked gently. Cynthia opened the door and her face broke into a smile, because of course it did. This was her mother-in-law. This was the woman whose son she was going to marry in the morning. She had no reason to guard herself, no reason to be afraid. Teresa was holding an orange. It was perfectly ripe, round and bright, the skin smooth and fragrant. An ordinary orange, the kind you might pick up at any market, any roadside stall, without a second thought. "My daughter," Teresa said, and her voice was gentle, the voice of a mother. "You must be tired. The preparations have been so much. Eat something. Keep your strength for tomorrow." She held out the orange with both hands. Cynthia took it. She peeled it right there in the doorway. She ate it, segment by segment, smiling, exchanging small pleasantries with Teresa about the next day's ceremony. Teresa watched her eat every piece. Then she hugged her, told her to rest well, and walked back down the corridor. In the morning, Cynthia walked down the aisle to meet her husband, radiant in white, completely unaware that the war had already begun, that the battle had already been fought in a quiet corridor with a piece of fruit, that the damage had already been done. The first year, they were hopeful. The second year, they visited a doctor. Everything seemed fine on paper. "Just be patient," the doctor said. "Relax. It will happen." The third year, Cynthia began to notice things. The way Teresa would sometimes look at her stomach, then look away. The way she would sigh, not dramatically, but quietly, meaningfully, whenever someone mentioned children at the dinner table. Small things. The kinds of things you might convince yourself you were imagining. The fifth year, the whispers started. Teresa would sit with Peter in the evenings, just the two of them, mother and son, and she would speak in the careful, measured tone of a woman who only wants what is best. "I am not saying anything, Peter. I am just a mother who is concerned. It has been 5 years. Have you considered that maybe, just maybe, there is something wrong? Not with you, of course, but perhaps with the situation." Peter would defend Cynthia. At first, but the whispers were patient. They did not demand. They simply planted. And over 5 years, and then 7, and then 10, the seeds grew in the dark and quiet of Peter's heart, watered by every failed hope, every empty nursery, every prayer that seemed to go unanswered. By the 10th year, Peter had changed. He was quieter, colder. He began to come home late without explanation. He stopped holding Cynthia's hand at church. When she tried to talk to him, he would listen with the polite, slightly distant attention of a man whose mind was somewhere else entirely. Teresa never pushed. She never needed to. She would simply make observations, gentle ones. "You deserve to be happy, my son. You deserve a full life." And then she would say nothing more, and Peter would sit with those words long after she had left the room. In the 11th year, Peter began spending time with another woman. Her name was Adèse. She was younger, cheerful, uncomplicated. She laughed easily. She never carried the weight that Cynthia now wore like a second skin, the weight of years of waiting, of hoping, of grieving quietly. What Peter did not know, what he could not have imagined, was that Adèse had not appeared in his life by accident. Teresa had arranged it. She had found the girl through a distant connection, had orchestrated the introduction, had made sure the paths crossed at the right time, in the right way. And when Peter began to show interest, Teresa said nothing to discourage it. She simply smiled and said, "A man cannot wait forever." By the 12th year, Adèse was in the house. Peter told Cynthia plainly. He said the words without flinching. He called her barren. He called her possessed. He said she was a dried tree that would never bear fruit. He said that perhaps she had done something, hidden something, that had brought this emptiness upon herself and upon their home. Cynthia listened to every word. She did not scream. She did not throw things. She simply looked at her husband, the man she had loved and served and stood beside for 12 years, and she felt something inside her go very, very still. She was still standing. She did not know why or how, but she was still standing. It was an ordinary Tuesday when everything changed. Cynthia had gone to the market to buy a few things for dinner. Even now, even in the ruins of her marriage, she cooked. It was the one thing that still felt like herself. The color, the smell, the rhythm of chopping and stirring. It was the one corner of her life that had not been taken from her. She was moving through the rows of stalls when she heard her name. "Cynthia, Cynthia Adèse." She turned. Standing before her, a basket on her arm, her face bright with recognition and disbelief, was Ngozi, her old school friend. They had been inseparable at 17. They had lost touch in the way that life sometimes separates people, gradually, without drama, just the slow drift of different directions. They stood in the middle of the market and held each other for a long time. They exchanged numbers. They made a plan to meet. And 1 week later, sitting in Ngozi's sitting room with 2 cups of tea growing cold between them, Cynthia told her everything. She told her about the 12 years, about the doctors who found nothing, about the pregnancy, God, the pregnancy, about 9 months of feeling something move and grow inside her, about the hope that had been so enormous it had frightened her, and then about the hospital room, the metal tray, the thing that should not have been. She told her about Peter, about the names he had called her, about Adèse sleeping in her home. She told her about Teresa. She did not accuse. She did not have evidence. She simply described what her life had become and said, in a voice that barely trembled, "I don't understand what I did wrong. I have searched myself. I have prayed. I don't know what I did." Ngozi was quiet for a long time after she finished. Then she said, "There is a man of God at my church. I want to take you to him." The prophet was an unassuming man. He did not shout or perform. He spoke quietly, with the calm certainty of someone who has learned to listen to things that most people cannot hear. After the Sunday service, he asked to see Cynthia privately. She sat across from him, and he looked at her for a long moment before he spoke. He told her things, specific things, things that had no explanation except that something beyond ordinary understanding had shown them to him. He described the shape of her suffering with such precision that Cynthia's hands began to shake. She confirmed everything he said. Then he told her what to do. For 3 nights, starting that very night, she was to pray at midnight. It did not matter where she was. It did not matter who was in the house. She was to pray, and she was not to stop, and she was not to be afraid. Cynthia went home that night, and at midnight, she began to pray. The first night something stirred in the house. She felt it more than heard it, a restlessness, a disturbance, like something that had been sleeping and had suddenly been woken. Somewhere down the corridor, she heard the sound of movement, of someone awake at an hour they should not have been. But nothing happened. The night passed, and in the morning, Cynthia woke up feeling, for the first time in years, that she was not entirely alone. The second night, Teresa came to her door. She knocked. She told Cynthia to stop. She said the prayers were disturbing the house, disturbing her sleep, disturbing the peace. She said it once, and then she said it again, her voice rising with something that did not sound quite like irritation, something more desperate than that. Cynthia kept praying. She prayed through Teresa's knocking. She prayed through the raised voice. She prayed until the knocking stopped and the corridor went quiet, and there was nothing left but the sound of her own voice in the darkness, steady and persistent as water wearing down stone. The third night came. It began just after midnight. Cynthia had been praying for perhaps 20 minutes when she heard it. Not a knock this time, but a sound she had never heard from Teresa before. A cry. Not of anger, not of irritation, of terror. She heard feet on the floor, rapid, stumbling, and then a door thrown open, and then Teresa's voice in the parlor, frantic and high, calling for Peter. Calling, calling. And beneath the words, beneath the panic, something that sounded almost like the beginning of a confession that could no longer be held inside. Cynthia stopped praying. She opened her door. She walked to the parlor. Peter was already there, still dressed, having been woken by the noise. Adeyezi sat on the far end of the sofa, drawn into herself, confused and frightened. And Teresa, who had always been so composed, so controlled, so perfectly wrapped in the costume of a devoted, harmless mother. Dosamunoi alfor alfen dosen alsen savernar I alfornar alse that December I dosar delner also ongring. Her hands moved over her body as if trying to brush something away that could not be seen. Her eyes were wild. Her voice came in fragments, prayers tangled with confessions, denial mixing with revelation. 12 years of carefully buried sin forcing itself up through the surface like something that had been held underwater finally breaking free. Peter looked at Cynthia. His face was the face of a man watching the floor of his world crack open. "What is happening to her?" he whispered. Cynthia said nothing. She stood in the doorway and watched. And then Teresa looked up, looked directly at her daughter-in-law with eyes that were streaming, that were terrified, that were, for the first time in 12 years, completely unguarded. And the words came out. All of them. She confessed the charms. She confessed the visits to the places she should never have gone, the things she had done, the price she had paid to ensure that Cynthia's womb would remain closed. She confessed the yam, the working that had planted something false inside Cynthia and let it grow for 9 months and then revealed itself in a hospital room in the cruelest possible way. And then she confessed a daze, that she had found her, that she had brought her, that she had placed her in Peter's path like a piece on a board, moving her exactly where she needed to go. The room was completely silent when she finished. Peter stood very still. Then he turned and looked at Adeyz with new eyes, with the eyes of a man seeing the full picture for the first time, and he said quietly, but without cruelty, "You need to leave. Tonight." Adeyz gathered her things and left without a word. When the house was quiet again, Peter sat across from his mother for a long time without speaking. Then he went to Cynthia. He did not make a speech. He did not explain himself or argue his case. He simply stood in front of her and let everything he felt be visible on his face. The shame, the grief, the horror of what he had participated in without knowing, the deeper horror of what he had willingly done with his own words, his own choices, his own cruelty. "I called you possessed," he said. "I called you a dried tree." His voice broke on the last word. I brought another woman into our home." Cynthia looked at him. "I know," she said simply. "I am sorry." The words were not enough, and he knew it. "I am so sorry, Cynthia. I don't know how to—" "I forgive you," she said. Not quickly. Not easily. But completely. It was the most powerful thing she had ever done. More powerful than the midnight prayers. More powerful than standing firm through 12 years of silence and suffering. Because forgiveness, real forgiveness, is not the absence of pain. It is the decision to refuse to let the pain become your permanent address. She forgave Peter, and then she went to Teresa. The old woman was sitting in her room, shrunken and gray, looking smaller than Cynthia had ever seen her. All the architecture of her persona, the sharp eyes, the composed posture, the warm smile that concealed so much, had crumbled. Cynthia sat across from her and asked one question. Why? Teresa was quiet for a long time. Then she looked up and said, with the bewildered honesty of someone who had spent a long time lying to herself, "I don't know. I told myself I was protecting my son. But—" She stopped. She looked at her own hands. "The devil was using me. I see that now. I did terrible things, and I told myself they were not terrible. I was wrong. I was so wrong." It was not a perfect answer. It was not a satisfying one. But it was the truth. And Cynthia, who had survived 12 years without the truth, understood its value more than most. She forgave her too. The months that followed were not easy. Healing never is. A wound that has been open for 12 years does not close overnight simply because the cause has been removed. There were days of silence. Days when Peter would look at Cynthia across the dinner table and feel the full weight of what he had allowed. Days when Cynthia would catch herself bracing for a cruelty that no longer came, her body still remembering what her mind was trying to release. But slowly, the way light returns after a long night, gradually and then all at once, things began to shift. Peter was present in ways he had not been in years. Not performing presence, not guilt-driven attention, but real, quiet, daily commitment. He came home when he said he would. He asked about her day and listened to the answer. He sat beside her in church and reached for her hand without thinking about it. And 3 months after the night of the confession, Cynthia woke up feeling different. She lay still for a moment, trying to understand the sensation. It was not pain. It was not nausea. It was something quieter than both of those things. A warmth, a fullness, a sense of presence that she had learned long ago not to trust. But this time was different. This time, she knew. 9 months later, on a warm Thursday morning, Cynthia gave birth to twins, a girl and a boy. The girl came first, fierce and loud, announcing herself with a cry that filled the entire ward. The boy came second, quieter, thoughtful, even in his first minutes, looking up at the world with wide, patient eyes. Peter wept. Not the way he had cried in that hospital room 12 years ago. Those had been tears of anger, of accusation, of a man who had not yet understood the size of his own blindness. These were different tears entirely. These were the tears of a man who had been given back something he did not deserve to receive, and who understood exactly how much grace that required. Teresa held the babies with hands that trembled. She was 80 years old. She looked at the girl and then at the boy and then at Cynthia, and whatever she saw in her daughter-in-law's eyes. Forgiveness, yes, but also the unshakable strength of a woman who had endured everything and still chosen love, undid her completely. "I am sorry," she whispered. It was the 3rd or 4th time she had said it. It would not be the last. "I know," Cynthia said, just as she had said to Peter, simple, complete. Because what Teresa had meant as a weapon, time had turned into a testimony. What she had buried in secret had been brought into the light, and what she had tried to prevent, The fullness of her son's life, the joy of a home overflowing with life, had arrived anyway. Double. The universe, it turns out, does not forget what is owed. 12 years of silence had been answered with 2 voices at once. 12 years of an empty cradle had been answered with 2 lives, 2 heartbeats, 2 futures. The orange had done its damage, but something greater had undone it. And in the end, past all the secrets, past all the suffering, past all the things that were done in the dark and all the tears that were shed in the night, what remained was this: a woman who had survived, a family that had been broken and, against all reasonable expectation, had chosen to be rebuilt. And 2 small, perfect, undeniable miracles, sleeping side by side, completely unaware of the war that had been fought for them before they were even conceived. What is done in the dark will always come to the light, and what the enemy meant for destruction, grace can turn into a testimony. Please don't leave without subscribing to our channel and tell us where you are watching from in the comment section.